CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reid has been covering the special counsel's investigation from the get-go and is outside the Justice Department now. So, Paula, the Attorney General tells Congress that, his intent is to, and I'm going to quote him, release as much of the special counsel's report as the law allows. So just walk us through what that might look like and just how long it may take until the public sees the complete findings.
Well, the Attorney General says he's mindful of the enormous public interest in this case. And sources tell CBS News that over the next few days and weeks, Barr will be here with his deputy, Rod Rosenstein, members of the Office of Legal Counsel, and a few other aides poring over this report to figure out what else they can release to the public. But there are some guidelines they have to work within. They cannot release certain materials that were presented to the grand jury, and the Justice Department has a policy of not releasing information about people who were not charged. But again, there are calls from the Hill, from other interested parties who want to see this full report. Now, in his confirmation hearing, William Barr vowed to be as transparent as possible, but he has never promised to release the full report.
So, Paula, as you know, the president spent the better part of 2 years discrediting the Mueller investigation. Now, the White House seems to agree with the conclusions of the special counsel's investigation. But what are they telling you about whether or not they want to see that full report become public?
Well, even before the report was public, the president had suggested, sure, go ahead, release the entire thing. And he had been pretty consistent recently about deferring to the Attorney General, saying it's all up to him, which is consistent with the guidelines and how a special counsel investigation works. But in the same breath, occasionally the president would suggest there should be no Mueller report and often disparage the investigation as a, quote, witch hunt. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about this earlier this morning, and she said she wasn't going to weigh in, but she did not think that the president would have a problem at this point if the entire report was released. So it seems that the main restrictions that the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General have on this are the legal precedent, the laws that restrict what they can and cannot release, and the fact that they'll have to go through a process. If there is anything in here that's possibly covered by executive privilege or any information that is confidential or classified. It's unlikely that we're going to get anything else this week, but I do expect, based on conversations I've had with sources here, we will get more material in the next few days or ultimately weeks.
So based on Robert Mueller's investigation, 6 former campaign aides and associates of the president have been charged, indicted, or pled guilty. And so I'm wondering now, moving forward, now that we can sort of put the Mueller report almost to bed, what's the likelihood of some of these associates being pardoned by the president? Is there any discussion of that?
The president has certainly been asked about whether or not he will issue a pardon, specifically for Paul Manafort, because Paul Manafort is one of the only folks who didn't plead guilty. In his first case, he said, no, I'm not going to plead. I'm not going to cooperate. I'm going to fight through a trial. Now, in his second case, he did plead guilty. He entered a plea deal with the special counsel, but he ultimately violated it by allegedly lying. So in that case, I think he stands the greatest possibility of getting a pardon. Now, the other option the president has is to commute his sentence, to let his conviction stand, to say, look, I recognize that he committed crimes, but I don't think he should have to spend the rest of his life in jail. Those are options that are available to the president. He's never said one way or another, but he did say that a pardon is still on the table for Manafort. Now, what about the other folks in this investigation? I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I'm pretty sure Michael Flynn blew his chance of any sort of clemency with his testimony before Congress, implicating the president and his family in numerous crimes. But then there are people like Richard Gates, his deputy campaign chairman. I spoke to sources close to that case. Rick Gates didn't want to plead guilty, but he could not afford, emotionally or financially, to fight through a trial. So he opted to plead guilty. He's someone the president could look at and potentially consider him for some clemency. But there's also the possibility that the president may just want to send a message about this entire investigation and pardon everyone who has pleaded guilty. I mean, there are some people in this investigation, one lawyer in particular I can think of, who has nothing to do with the president. But he pleaded guilty, and the president could just say, you know what? This entire thing was, as he likes to refer to it, as a witch hunt. I'm going to pardon everyone. It remains to be seen what the president does, but I'd be surprised if he does anything before the upcoming election. I think that's something he will likely wait until his second term to make these decisions.
Should he be elected to a second term? And Paul, I want to ask you about the
fair.
The president is still facing, though, investigations into his business, campaign, the inauguration, right here in New York State. Is he still in legal jeopardy, I guess, is the question some people want to know.
Absolutely. The Russia investigation is over, but the president's legal problems are far from complete. There are now more investigations than there were even just a year ago. They're sort of proliferating, metastasizing far beyond the Russia investigation. For example, federal prosecutors in New York, they're looking into possible crimes related to the president's business. They're also looking into campaign finance violations. And that case should concern the president because that's a case where you have several witnesses who have implicated the president in directing campaign finance violations. Michael Cohen certainly has some credibility problems. He's one of the cooperating witnesses. But you also have AMI, the publisher of the National Enquirer, and you have its chairman and CEO, David Pecker. They have all pleaded guilty and implicated the president in this campaign finance violation scheme. Now, in addition, there are local investigations in Washington and New York looking into possible tax fraud or these questions about whether or not the president may have illegally received foreign money through his hotels. But right now, this Justice Department does not believe that a sitting president can be indicted. So a lot of these questions will likely have to wait until the president is out of office.
All right, Paula, thank you so much.
Thanks, Paula.